Welcome back, everybody, to Through Help and Back. As most of you know, with our dedicated followers, Through Help and Back is a podcast that is focused on the world of mental health, addiction treatment, but always from a hopeful perspective, always from a positive psychology perspective. Our hope is that this time you spend with us is not spent just talking about problems like some other podcasts or like maybe some of your interaction with mental health in the past. But you actually leave with some ideas and some solutions and some hope that'll make life a little bit better. As always, Through Help and Back is fully sponsored by a company known as 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health. 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health is an outpatient provider of mental health and addiction services. If you are in Ohio or you're in New Hampshire, you really need to become familiar with 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health. Addiction, mental health. I don't know of a family in this country that has not been touched by one of those two issues, if not both. And if you're in Ohio or you're in New Hampshire, 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health has psychiatrists, we have therapists, we have nurse practitioners, nurses, case managers, and available for you to get help on the individual therapy side, group therapy side, really whatever you need. All this is done on an outpatient basis, so there's no concerns about having to go away from treatment or get into a hospital system. You can check out everything that 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health does at 𝐬𝐬BH.com. So that's ANEWBH.com. We're very thankful for their sponsorship and their support that makes all this possible. While you're online looking at 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health Services, I also want you to remind you that Through Help and Back has an ever-increasing and ever-growing web presence thanks to our wonderful producer Ian, who is here with me as always. You can find us on TikTok. I don't know what the hell that is because I'm over 40. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube. If you're seeing me right now, you're probably watching on YouTube. And you can also, reach out to us. Last episode, we had a Q&A. We've had some great responses from our viewers. Through helpandback@gmail.com. If you have recommendations for future topics, guests, you have questions, you just want to know what the heck I was talking about or what our guests were talking about, you can reach us there. Ian, scrolls through all of those. Most of you saw Ian last time. So if you just want to hit Ian up and, ask him if he's single or try to talk to him, you can do that through that website as well too. We had some overwhelming response to finally revealing your face, Ian. It was a groundswell of support, and we were hearing more Ian. So we're going to find ways to do that. But thank you for all that, and thank you for the support. We hope you'll keep connecting with us there. Back to talking about 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health. I actually have a guest today from 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health. I have Keith Frazier, who is actually the clinical supervisor for all of 𝐬𝐬 Behavioral Health Services. He is a licensed independent clinical social worker. He is licensed in multiple states, and he does a great job making sure that 𝐬𝐬 provides the highest quality services possible and that all of 𝐬𝐬 therapists and providers have the best support possible. So, Keith Frazier, Mr. Frazier, how are you today?
Fine. Good to be here with you, Jason.
Yeah, it's nice to see you too. Where are you in the world today? Where are you joining us from? So you're not down the street. I know that.
No, I'm not down the street. I'm in my office in Ashland, Kentucky, which is in the northeastern corner of Ashland at the conjunction of Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky, if you want to be a geography student.
Nice. So right on the river there, right tucked in the corner. And so, and everybody, when I talk with Keith and people were first talking with Keith, the first thing that stands out is that very popular accent you have. Is that an Ashland specific accent? Did you grow up there, or where did we pick that up at?
I was born and raised in Ashland, and then like all kids my age in the 70s, I ran like hell to get away from eastern Kentucky. Spent my life traveling through Kentucky and Indiana, and somehow I came back to Ashland on a temporary basis in 1994.
Still temporary, or
still temporary? I'm planning to leave. I just don't know when. Now I've got a house to sell and all kinds of roots that I've put down, and so I'm here. But I do have, because I'm licensed in multiple states, I do have the opportunity to work in a variety of areas. And Ashland is actually, I don't want to demean it. It is a wonderful small town, about 20,000 people. And it's just a great place to be. It's low crime and just a nice, friendly place.
I don't think anybody's selling any houses right now with these interest rates and what's going on in the world. It's a good time to batten down the hatches and just enjoy where you're at and where you're from. So,
well, we're doing some renovation right now, trying to, if we ever decide to sell, then we'll have stuff ready. But I don't know. Like I said, it's just I'm here. I'm in Ohio quite a bit. I'm licensed in Kentucky and Ohio and New Hampshire. So with Anew, I've ventured into New England, and I'm riding the wave, see where Anew takes me next.
Well, we're going to take you to Fenway. Keith, for those of you watching in New England, Keith is a huge Red Sox fan. So coming home to New England probably felt pretty good
Yes.
as far as adding that. So
that was part of the contract, if I remember right. Yeah, but so yeah, let's wait till the Red Sox are actually potentially playoff capable. This team this year was just a little bit subpar.
Tough year. Well, I mean, I've been to Fenway a couple times. I'm not a big Red Sox fan. I grew up on the Reds, and so obviously by late May, I'm pretty much done with baseball, and I'm just watching the good teams play. But it's still an experience. And we have to get you back there and get you to check out those Red Sox.
I became a Red Sox fan, and you speak of hope. I mean, being a Red Sox fan, there was nothing but hope in being a Red Sox fan. But I fell in love with the Green Monster on a Saturday broadcast in the 60s when I was real young. The Reds had traded my favorite player of all time, Frank Robinson, and I swore I'd never root for the Reds again. And that was 1965. So I'm nothing but consistent on that point. But anyway, I'm also a Colts fan, so Baltimore Colts, and they traded Robinson to Baltimore. So I thought, well, I'll become a Baltimore Orioles fan. So the first Saturday game of the week was Baltimore at Boston. And I watched the game and I saw the Green Monster and Carl Yastrzemski, and it's just, I've never looked back. I've been a Red Sox fan for a long time. Been to Fenway once and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's great. I think Fenway and Wrigley, obviously the old Yankee Stadium, I mean, it's too late for that, but those were the big sort of monuments to the passage of time. And Wrigley and Fenway are still as is, with some enhancements.
The scary thing is Chavez Ravine in Dodger Stadium is the third oldest stadium now in baseball. I
didn't know that.
And it's younger than I am.
I didn't know that.
It was built in the early 60s. And it's kind of like, I love I remember walking through Fenway and just seeing just like Ghost. And it was just amazing. Couldn't talk to the guy to let me walk up on top of the Green Monster. He was firmly convinced I didn't need to go up there and take a look. And so.
Well, they have seats up there now. So next time we go, we'll just take care of that and cut that guy out of the equation and we'll get up there. So.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
So it's interesting to hear how you picked up the Red Sox. It's interesting to hear about some of your travels. I'm also interested how you got into the world of therapy and mental health. I don't know if you want to take us all the way back to the beginning, but tell us a little bit about what brought you to this field and what's kept you here for so long.
Well, I didn't have grades good enough to get in law school. It's a short story. I enjoyed my college years very much. I thought studying and class attendance was optional. So my screaming 2.35 grade point average didn't exactly excite law schools across the country. So I somehow fumbled into this. I got a job and started working in this and went away for a while, worked about 4 years in community mental health, and grants were going away at that time, and community mental health centers were shrinking, and they were getting rid of people who weren't, degreed in the field. And my political science degree didn't exactly make me employable. So I found myself working as a deputy jailer and for 2 years. And 1 year because I was trying to convince myself I liked being in corrections, and another to get out. And I found my way back to working in community mental health, and I went back to grad school and got my master's in social work, and been at it ever since. I've worked in a variety of different settings and different places, and just thoroughly enjoy it. I got my master's in '89, and I got my first clinical license in '92. So, as people that I work with, I've noticed the people that I work with are much younger than me, and and I have to tell them about things that happened, and they look at me and go like, "You mean when dinosaurs walked the earth?" And I'm going like, "Pretty much, yeah." So,
Yeah. Cause well, I'm old as hell. And even I hear 89 and I'm sort of like, yeah, I hadn't started high school at that point. So
yeah, I was late getting my master's. It took me a few years to actually get enough. I had to take some grad school classes to get my grade point up to where they'd actually admit me to grad school. And so
yeah.
it took me about 7 years to get actually into grad school. And I did well then because I understood and finally figured out, hey, this is important, and it's amazing. I've thoroughly enjoyed my profession. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. And I've just it's like the old line that when a door closes, a window opens. And I've always opportunities just come along, and
well, I think it is. I think it is a really valuable message, especially, we're going to talk about hope. That's kind of the loose topic for today, and fostering hope. But, I actually run into like a lot of young people now where there almost seems to be this kind of existential crisis where like, hey, I'm 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, and I don't have it all figured out. Like I don't have a plan and I don't even know what the hell I want to do. And maybe I'm working a part-time job or whatever. And it really affects them, right? Like there's almost like a little bit of panic that sets in that says like, I'm supposed to have this all, not that I'm supposed to be the CEO or have my master's yet, but I certainly should have my goal figured out. And I've got a lot of that in my background too. And it sounds like you do as well, that if you don't know exactly what you're doing in your early 20s, you're still okay. Like there's time.
I can tell you this, I'm 65 years old and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, so, I laugh at people like that too. Like, well, I don't know. I should have a plan. And people I went to high school and college with that I'm still friends with had these great plans. They were going to do all these things. And very few actually followed through and met the goals that they set for themselves in their early 20s.
Yeah, there's a thing going around right now on social media where they set these clips to different quotes, and one of the quotes is like, I don't even have an idea of what I'm going to do tomorrow, and the person's response is, how exciting, right? Because almost anything's possible. And I think if you get too narrow focused early on, like we know the lawyer thing, right? Like I'm going to be a lawyer no matter what. Well, you hit a lot of roadblocks, and if you had kept forcing that, I know you, Keith, you probably would have become a lawyer, but would that have been to the exclusion of the things you were actually meant to do? Were you not meant to develop and change along the way?
No, I think I was, and I think things happen for a reason. I grew up very much in a Eastern Kentucky Baptist background, but I've kind of gone away from that quite a bit. But I'm still very spiritual, and I firmly believe that things do happen, for a reason. And so, like I said, I don't know how to explain it. But when you're talking about hope, I was having a conversation with somebody and they said, how do you know things are going to be good tomorrow? And I say, they were good. I didn't know yesterday how good things are going to be today, and it's just that expectation that good things are going to happen.
Well, and that's where we both work for 𝐸 right now, 𝐸 Behavioral Health. And one of the phrases, it's not really like a catchphrase, but kind of developed around that is, if you find yourself on the wrong path, you can always begin anew. And it's kind of a catchy little saying that says, hey, you can begin anew and you can start, but people end up on the wrong path sometimes in life, and or they just feel like it's not clicking. I think that you should feel some type of energy around your decisions, and if they're just sort of slogging through life or serving time, I don't think that's what we're here. I don't think we're meant to just pay bills and struggle each day. I think we're supposed to find that purpose and pursue it. And if you find it at 50, great. If you find it at 25, great. But you're going to find it. Keep looking. You can always begin anew. You can start a new idea tomorrow. That's what 𝐸 was. We started an idea, and here we are. A couple years later, and boom, look what's happened. So
we've come a long way in a short period of time, and it was just when you first mentioned it to me, it was just an innocuous idea, and we just talked about everything that we'd been through, and you and I have both been on the wrong path.
100%.
And so to do something new and different is exciting. And I'm enjoying the ride, and I'm enjoying helping to train our clinicians to be more responsive to our customers, to our consumers.
Well, and then we talk about progress and moving along, and I do want to talk about your supervision role a little bit and how you help other folks. But I'm also interested in your work specifically. So, if you think back to the early part of your career, the types of issues that you were working with versus like later in your career, what's been the biggest change, in your approach or even in you as a therapist? Like, if you could kind of look back in time and go, see yourself as that 25, 30-year-old just starting out versus how you work now, like what's the biggest difference we would see?
Well, I've found out when I was 25, I thought I knew everything, and now that I'm 65, I know I don't. You know, actually, I mean, I think I don't. That's a little bit fun. I mean, a little bit joking, but it's true in a way. Is that you realize things just don't work. You have a plan, and when things go astray, if you don't have some flexibility and don't kind of go with it a little bit and ride it, you kind of get lost in it. And that's where hopelessness is when you have these limitations on what's going to happen, and it doesn't work that way because life doesn't work that way. And if you're not able to expand and adjust and change horses in the middle of the stream, as the old song goes, you're not going to make it. You're going to be hopeless. And I think the biggest change for me is I started out. Well, first off, I was working as a substance abuse counselor, and I had no idea what that was about. In those days, all you had to have was a bachelor's degree, and they'd hand you a stack of charts and give you a desk, and your first client's at 9:30.
Yep. Good luck.
And, yeah, and I fumbled through. My friends used to ask me, well, what do you know about being a substance abuse counselor? And I would, half jokingly say, well, I lived in a fraternity house for 3 years. So I learned a lot about abuse. I didn't learn a lot about treatment and recovery. That I had to learn on the fly. So once I got a handle on that enough, I thought I knew everything. And I've learned through my experience that, every time I think I have it down, I know everything, I've seen everything, I've done everything, here comes something and I go, what in the Sam Hill is that? And it's just completely throws that all out the window. So the biggest change for me has been my ability to adapt and not be so set on this is going to be the way it is, personally and professionally.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in the therapy world, it is intertwined, right? You can't really, you do your best you can to kind of switch roles and to be in therapist mode, but you are human. You are who you are, and you have the stuff that's going on in your life. And I think finding balance between almost being an integrated person where how I live my life matches how I am in therapy, and I think our clients recognize that too. They know authenticity, and they know when they've got the real deal in front of them, and they know when they've got somebody playing therapy, right? Or pretending, that stands out for sure. Ian, did you have a thought on that? I saw some shuffling. What are your thoughts there, Ian?
I just wanted to highlight Keith's definition for hopelessness, because I experienced that myself 3 years ago or something when I graduated high school, and I was so set on what I wanted, which was a positive thing, but I was so focused that I didn't have any flexibility in my mind. And when any threat that came my way that kind of threatened my quote unquote plan, I just started to panic all the time. And I had to learn to not be so stubborn.
Yeah. Be open to new possibilities, right? Like an analogy from nature, you see the storms that roll through like in Florida or whatever, and they always show on the news, you see these trees that are almost laid over on their side, kind of whipping back and forth, right? And then you see these big tall trees with the strong, rigid trunks. Well, when the storm's over, those big, strong oaks with the rigid trunks are broken in half and on the ground, and those trees that could kind of flex and bend are still standing, right? So being able to suffer, kind of through those storms and have some flexibility and being open to new versions of self, I think is incredibly important. And Ian, luckily for you, you learned it at 18, 19, right? I mean, there's some people who go through their whole life trying to force that outcome and keeping that rigidity, and they suffer because of it. I think and a lot of stress around that. So yeah, Keith, I want to mirror kind of what you're saying and connect with you on that, because I think, I'm definitely not a finished product therapy wise, and we talk a lot on here about therapy being more art than science, and you just become maybe not even better, but just a different style of artist. You learn to work with it in a different way. And for me, when I got spit out by the education system and had some paper and some alphabet soup behind my name, I left with the idea that if I could just execute the therapeutic techniques perfectly, that I would be like the most helped. I was going to be like the best at doing this type of therapy, right? I was going to nail all the words. I was going to have the timing down perfect. And that works for about, 5-10 minutes, and you get in session and the curveballs come from all different angles and clients say stuff you've never heard or you didn't expect, or you're in the middle of executing the therapy perfectly and they're like, no, that's bullshit. I don't want that. I just want to talk to you, and you're like, oh, now I have to really
now you got to be real,
Right. That's a scary thing to be sometimes.
I work with, and I don't just work with the new. I work with a couple other agencies, and one of the agencies I work with is a residential substance abuse program or substance use disorder. You have to excuse me. I've gone through several versions of the DSM, and I forget which word to use.
SUD, alcohol or drug, SUDS, yeah.
Chemical dependency. I've been through it all.
Addiction treatment, yeah.
Yeah. I was a substance abuse professional when I started, and then I've been everything else. But anyway, I work with these young people who come into group, and like when we're doing a process group, I just try to say what you need to do is let the clients give you something and go with it. Get 5, 6 guys, 7, 10 guys in a group, and then throw it out there. If nobody says something, then you better have something prepared to generate some discussion. But guaranteed, you put that many people in a room, they're going to start talking. Somebody's going to say something. Because the one thing I found that people don't like is silence. So they will start talking. And then it's a matter of directing it and getting these people, they go and they want a script. They want something to lay here and say, this group's going to happen like this. And I said, no. This group's going to happen, and you've got to figure out how to bring it to a close, how to sum it up so it makes sense. And I said, so yeah, you need to have an idea where people don't let people go too far off tangent, off topic, so you can bring it back, but bring it back and make it so it fits, and everybody has, has an understanding of the process.
Yeah, we could get way in the weeds and talking about the therapeutic use of silence, but that's almost an advanced skill to develop to learn how to do nothing effectively.
I thought about doing that for some of your questions. Just sit here and go.
It would be fun. It makes me nervous right off the bat.
No, I wouldn't do that. You and I both are too much talkers, so that won't happen.
All the fears and insecurities flare up. Oh, it's going to hell. The podcast is going to fail. This isn't working. Yeah, it'd be fun. So, so it's to try to get somewhere near the topic, because we've been everywhere but, right? So we talked about hope, and I was reading a little bit about that, prepping for this. And, one of my favorite, authors and theorists and practitioners ever was Viktor Frankl, right? And I'm sure you know him real well, Man's Search for Meaning. And, he survived, life and death in a Nazi concentration camp, and left that to, form the foundations of what he called logotherapy, which was, what he thought was all about making meaning. And one of his thoughts around hope was that, hope is the basis for all meaning, right? So when you talk about that issue of hopelessness, what follows behind that is then you don't have meaning to your life, because you don't have that hope to kind of fill it up and give that meaning. And so that's how hopelessness can set up and set in. And so his thing was, I want to foster hope at every opportunity, because that's the main road to personal meaning. That's the road to purpose. So that's the Viktor Frankl take on hope. What's the Keith Frazier take on hope in a therapeutic context?
Now's a good time to be silent.
Yeah. No. It's hard to set you up. Hey, Viktor Frankl, one of the legends.
Yeah, I started to say, and I got to come up with something meaningful.
Follow that. Yeah. Well, I guess you could start with, do you agree? I mean, do you think he's onto something?
I believe he is onto something. And I think hope is the ability to see possibly something that's not there. One of my, favorite movie quotes of all time. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. I love it. I can't find it now. I want to buy a copy of it on DVD, and I can't find it. It's called The Rainmaker. It was made in like the 1950s. Burt Lancaster plays a character named Starbuck, and he comes to a small Oklahoma town that's in the middle of drought.
And and he started a coffee shop, right?
No. That was a 90s version. That didn't go over too well. In this version, he's a rainmaker, and he convinces these people he can make it rain, or most of the people. And they're so desperate because they've been so long without rain. And he's a shuckster. He's a heister, and he realizes at some point in there that he overpromised, that he has no ability to make it rain. But he tells the love interest in the movie, he's in his one great line, he says, "Faith is seeing white when your eyes tell you black." And I love that line. And I think that basically faith, hope, whatever you want to call it, is the ability to see the potential for change. And so tie that into Frankl's search for meaning. Meaning is the basis of that. Whatever it is, you've got to believe that it's going to get better. In the middle of the drought, in the middle of the storm, whatever, it's going to be better. This ain't going to last forever. My dad was always famous for looking at me and saying, "This too shall pass," which I think is in the Bible somewhere. That was my dad's line. It's in the Bible somewhere. So I have no idea where, but this too shall pass. And you realize that things are going to change, and it's going to be that. And you've got to find hope in the change and be open to that. So yeah, I hope that I'm not trying to rival Viktor Frankl.
Well, I think you might have something on him there. I think that you're expanding on his original idea and modernizing it in a way, because today you talk about a drought, thinking about building on your movie, thinking about the drought, and I hear you talking about the desperation of the people who want to believe. And I think about how many people come to us. It's almost like there's two buckets, right? We get folks who are in that desperation and they want to believe that life can get better, and maybe the therapist can be the rainmaker for me. Maybe they can help that happen, right? And I think you get the other group, and sometimes you get this in involuntary clients or family mandated clients, where maybe they don't believe they're desperate and they don't believe it's possible for it to rain ever again, And I think, being the rainmaker in that situation and being able to work with both groups. So how do you approach it with that second group? How do you work with somebody who comes in as close to hopeless as they can be? Where do you start with somebody like that who's starting at 0 or below?
The first thing I try to tell them is I don't have the answers. Don't look to me. I'm not the shaman. I don't have this ability to fix things. My job is to help you find the answers within you. And we try to, some people are intractable. There's the negative people who you'll never reach. They're either because of tragedy that's happened to them or experiences. They don't believe that anything good is ever going to come, and they're negative, and you'll never change that. But, you want to try to find the people that you can help to change. And it's basically getting them to believe that they have the power to make some changes. It's not everything that happened to them. It's, okay, how can you deal with it? How can you accept it? How can you look at this? And it's just trying to change a concept, trying to reframe. If you want to use CBT language, it's reframing a situation and trying to get people to find some sliver, something they can grab a hold of. I've told you the story 100 times about me falling.
I was hoping you were going to go for it. Yeah, when you said the sliver, I sat up straight. Please do. Please do. This is one of my favorites.
This is an absolutely true story.
That helps. That helps it be one of my favorites.
It happened to a young boy in Eastern Kentucky who was about probably 10 years old. And I was with my parents, and we were visiting my mom's aunt, so my great aunt. And she owned a farm down in Johnson County outside of Paintsville, Kentucky. And if you've ever been in that part of the country, there is no flat land. You can't walk 10 feet without walking up or down. And in a holler, she owned a farm, which was basically the side of a hill, or they call it mountains. But after I got out and saw some real mountains, I realized Eastern Kentucky has foothills. But anyway, she had this side of the hill. And my brother was a few years older than me, and he and I were bored listening to the adults talk. So we decided to go explore the farm. And we get up on this, you went up the hill a little bit, and there was this little flat area, and there used to be a well there. Well, they had covered the well just with cheap lumber. And most people were smart enough to stay away from it, realizing that cheap wood, old wood, outside, wet, rots, and gets weak. Well, my brother and I, being adventuresome souls, play this game where we run across the wood to see who can get across the wood. Well, guess who loses?
The guy with the 2.3 GPA.
Yeah.
Running across the wood. Yeah.
Running across the wood crack, snap, pop. I fall down about, I don't know. At that age, it could have been 100 miles, but it probably was 15 feet. And if you've ever watched old wells being drilled, they never drill straight down. The drill will hit a rock and move and go down and move. And so the wells are not perfectly straight. And I remember looking up, and as long as I could see blue sky, I was fine. But there are ways that I could move inside that well, and it's like the ground swallowed me up. And it was black. And I would feel myself panic. Well, my brother, being I guess I better do something about this, ran and got my father, and he went and got a piece of rope and threw a piece of rope down, said, tie it around your waist, and I did. And he pulled me up, and I got out of the well, and I had to listen to my mother tell me what a stupid thing that was to do. And my dad kind of saying, like, next time you pull yourself up, and well, you had the rope. I could, but anyway, the point being, when I look at that story and I think about it looking back, and God, that was 50 years ago. I understand hopelessness, because when you do not see a sliver, when you do not see some sunshine, some blue sky, it's like you give up. And I think that's what happens to a lot of our clients, especially the ones that, consider suicide, is that they don't have any hope. They don't see that sliver, and they never will. And so, you try your best to give people a semblance of hope. Hope is an expectation of something good is going to happen. And
or at least that this bad thing's not going to last forever.
Right. But
at the minimum,
there's somebody will throw a rope down the well and pull you out.
How long were you in there?
Oh, for probably 10, 11-year-old boy, I was in there for like 6, 7 days.
Yeah, right. The news reports.
Yeah, but I probably was in there for 15 minutes, just long enough to be able to feel it and understand it. And like I said, I began to move, and I would always move. Once I saw blue sky, I tried to stay in that position, and I could see my dad. My dad was a big man, and when he looked down that hole, he basically blocked all light coming into that hole. But I heard his voice, and he said, "I'm gonna throw you down the rope. Tie it around your waist." And it came down. I tied it up tight, and up I went. And he started pulling, and I started climbing, and I got up there. But it was, it gave me, and at the time it was nothing. It was just what a little kid did,
But here you are almost 60 years later, and you when you tell the story, you can see it, you can feel it. Like,
oh yeah, and I can feel it. I can be I'm that little kid in that well, and it just helps me understand, and that's where it came back. The realization of it, it's an experience that I probably had buried and hadn't thought of until I got working in a crisis program where I was dealing with, people that were suicidal on an hourly basis. And then I started, and then it just kind of dawned on me, and I remember that, and I've told that story 100 times in therapy, that you can find it. There is help out there, and it's getting people to understand that, and believe it.
I love that story so much because it works on so many levels. For one, it's a biblical allegory right off the bat, right? So you're looking up to the heavens and you're lost in the depths of hell for, an 8-year-old boy or whatever. And then your Father who art in heaven appears hallowed be thy name. He appears to you, right? And drops the rope. But it wasn't a rescue mission in the sense of like and then you're lifted up, you're ascending to the heavens, but you had to do some things on your own behalf. You had to catch the rope. You had to stay calm during that time. You had to tie the rope. You had to have faith, because I bet when your feet left the ground, it was like, whoa, I'm feeling this a little bit. So I love it on that level. I love it that it's such a great substitute for therapy too, because there's God our Father, but then there's also you. Now you're the guy with the rope a lot of times, right, with these clients, and using that experience. I just think it's an amazing story on so many levels.
It's just, you can make, I've thought about writing a book about it, just of that experience, and just at least a story,
Yeah. You should go back and see if you can get in the well still. You're
I have no idea where that farm is or that property. When you're 10, 11 years old and your parents are driving to see their relatives, you're not exactly like
making a map.
Nah, you're not.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have a rough idea, but Lord, and that road has probably changed. That property's probably changed.
You'd hope they filled in the well or something, So
I hope so.
All the little boys, yeah. So yeah. So that I thank you for sharing that again. I wasn't going to ask for it, but I'm glad you went with it.
It kind of worked. It kind of put everything together, and so
when you're thinking about the rope, and people are looking for resources and looking for places where they can find their rope and find their hope necessarily. So I know that you said that you tell the clients, I can't do it for you. But what are the things that you suggest that they do on their own behalf to help build that hope or discover that hope in their lives? Are there some common places or techniques or mindsets that people can adopt? If somebody's listening right now and they're feeling that lack of hope, what are 2 or 3 things that you recommend that they investigate?
I would say probably they need to, and again, I think to me, therapy is looking inward. And I think they need to look in and find a strength, not necessarily the answer, but find something in there they can grab a hold of. And so what I tell people, again, it's reframing. Everything is not, is not set in stone. This is not forever. This too shall pass, which again is biblical. But you find that, and it's really funny. I end up quoting my father more in therapy probably than I do Erickson or any of the other Jung or any of the other philosophers or therapists or people that I've read, because he just had a way of putting things, into everyday language. And so I end up, and also too, it becomes, I don't know if you ever watched the old TV show Maverick.
I know of it. I'm not a big watcher, but I certainly know.
The characters in there was always talking about their pappy. Pappy always said, and I called my old man Pap, and I said, Pap always said, and I would quote it, and it gives some sense of authority. When you're talking about your father told you this, it's automatically like, wow, and people believe it and they can grasp a hold of it. So if I can find some kind of some summary that he put together for in a situation, and then pass that on, say, well, my dad always told me, that you're going to find your way out. Which you can't find your way out if you don't start walking. Just simple things like that.
But it resonates. It makes sense, right? They don't want to drown in theory. They don't want a master's degree in therapy. They want something that I can hang on to that'll help guide me,
Yeah, and that's where I think a lot of times you get people who are classically trained, and this is where therapy is more of an art than a science. You get people that are classically trained, they don't know how to relate as humans. I think talking about hope, talking about personal experiences, talking about what your father told you, gives you some credibility with some people. Now, there are some people that say, I'm paying you X number of dollars per hour. I want to hear wisdom, and there are that. And then I usually let them down because I don't know if I'm worth that much money,
Yeah, yeah. I think, well, and I climb on this soapbox every chance I get. I think therapists are dramatically underpaid because when you think about how you can change the trajectory of somebody's life, I don't know what's more valuable than that.
And when you change somebody's life, you just don't change that person.
Thank you. Yes. Keep going. That's good.
That's what I like about my social work education is that, you're taught to think systemically. And, if you change the life of one person in a family, it's going to affect the whole family. It's going to affect the whole community.
And you know that to be true because of the words of wisdom that your father passed on to you that have helped how many clients? Right?
I couldn't tell you. That's the one thing. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, how many people you think you've worked with? And I said, I have no idea. I really don't. I remember some clients from 40 years ago. And I remember, and some I can't remember I had 2 years ago. I'll see them on this, and Ashland's a small town. You see your clients, So when I had my private practice pre-COVID, COVID kind of changed my desire to have people in my office.
Well, if you do the math on it, Keith, I think I have to do. I'm sure I'll be wrong, and somebody will email and say you can't do math, and I'll say that's why I'm a therapist. But
that's why I'm a social worker.
Yeah, we're thinking about this the other day, and I mean, if you think about 6 sessions a day, which is sometimes light, 40, 5 days a week, and you do that for 50 weeks a year because you maybe take a vacation here and there, and you do that for 10 years. I mean, it climbs up over 15,000, sessions pretty fast.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I mean, it goes quick. So
the one thing about the human mind that I think is fascinating, and as I get older, I'm amazed by, is the ability to recall. And it's just somebody will say something. I spent a couple weekends ago. I went back to my college for homecoming, and I saw probably 40, 50 of the guys who are now well into senior citizen who were older than me. And we relived our 18, 19, 20-year age range. And we did it all by 10 o'clock at night because everybody had to go home and go to bed. But the stories were amazing. All I had to hear was one little snippet. And then my mind would just be flooded with all these memories. And it was just amazing. And it still happens to me. Somebody can say something. And all of a sudden I remember. And that's like, memories from my childhood. I may not be able to recall a lot of memories, but if a cousin or a brother or somebody says something, it's like boom. Or I see something, or I hear a song on the radio, and it's like, and I'm flooded with these memories. And I think that's an amazing aspect of the mind. I think we remember and recall about everything, but what we can actually use is just a snippet of that.
Well, and if you flip that and you think about our clients, sometimes those memory, those little pieces that bring back those memories, if you're somebody who's experienced trauma or you have bad memories, those are your triggers, right? And so you smell a certain smell, or you see a certain color, or you hear a certain thing, and all of a sudden you're right back there, right? And your story had a happy ending. There's a lot of these stories out there that don't have a happy ending, and people carry that around with them every day. And that, I mean, we talk about hope. I don't know how. I'm actually blown away by so many of our clients where I get to a place where I'm like, I don't know how you keep going day in and day out. I don't know how you keep building your own hope, because I hear those stories and I think personally I couldn't have gone through half of that, So it's really amazing.
I think what we have sometimes lose in doing therapy is we forget how resilient people can be. I think we need to build on that resiliency. I think people have a natural, and I've noticed this in working with kids who were traumatized. Some kids can pull through, really, fairly well, and they deal with it. They understand, trauma is not who you are; it's what happened to you. Getting people to understand that. Some kids have a natural ability to understand that, and they just move on. But other kids are lost in that, and they're damaged by that. And I think what we have to do is teach them to find some level of resiliency so they can look at things a little differently. Because if you're always looking at things through a negative lens, it's always going to be negative. But if you can change that and say, let's look at it differently. Again, I was a CBT therapist long before I knew what CBT was. Because it just made sense to me. You think about something and it changes something, But reframing is a concept of cognitive behavioral therapy. That is, you have to change the way you look at things.
Have you noticed any trends between those groups when you think about children or clients in general, the ones who can develop that resiliency? Do you think that they're born with that, or is that something we can develop?
I think both. I think some people are just naturally, we had a therapist in Ohio who called me, and she had a guy who was like, he had and did an intake on him and did an assessment, and he quoted being traumatized when he was a kid, but he's over that. And she was like, she did not believe he's over that. And I said, well, first off, you got to believe that what the client says. Now, if he demonstrates that he's not over it, that's another story. But I said, accept the natural resilience. Okay, you did amazing things to overcome that. How did you do that? Because he was in for, I'm not sure, I can't remember what the diagnosis was, but he was in for something completely different, and it was just a question on the assessment. And he just talked about this horrific abuse that he occurred, but he dealt with it, and she was like, I don't believe he could deal with it. And I said, well, again, just watch him. See, if he hasn't, it'll come up, but if he doesn't bring it up, then yeah, he probably has. People have that. They have that ability. Sometimes we can train people. We can get people to find it. I don't think we do it. I think they do it themselves. We help them find it.
And I wonder in that situation if it's not a little bit of attributional error where, like what I just said, maybe it's not so much I can't believe he's dealt with it. Maybe it's more of I couldn't believe that I could deal with it, right? And I'm kind of putting that on him a little bit. So I've had that same experience, and it speaks to me about the individual nature of trauma. There is no scale, right? So, because I've had clients who have had major incidents over years that I would think, wow, this is going to be completely devastating. And they've gotten to that place of hope and resiliency, and which is a great Milton Erickson book, Hope and Resiliency. And they're functional, and they're happy, and they're dealing with it. And I've had other ones that, you never want to do this, but if you were going to rank the trauma, it's like, well, this is probably less severe, and they're floored for years. The bounce back is not there. And so we have to work really hard on that.
And I think what's traumatic to one person may not be that traumatic to the second. I mean, that's another where you can't say there's a scale of 1 to 10 that they experience a 10th degree trauma, so yeah, I think you have to do that. And then there are people, I think of this one lady that came to see me when I opened my practice here, and I hadn't even advertised. She just walked in the building where I was and saw my name on the board, came up and knocked on the door and said, could I see her?
That's nice when that happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I was like brand new, was just to get things organized. I sure come in, sit down. And we had probably an hour and a half session where she was 68 years old. She had been married for 50 years. Her husband had died 4 months before that. Okay. And she was trying to adjust to that. And then also trying to adjust to being an individual instead of a couple. Because she left her father's home and went to her husband's home. And in those days, women didn't have identity. And so she now was and children were grown and moved away. And so she had nobody. And so she came to see me, and I said, well, and she said, I don't care what it costs. I've got money. I don't, and I'm sitting there going like,
now you mention it.
This is a way to start a practice. You want daily sessions? No, I didn't do that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You think it. Yeah.
In the course of this conversations we had, she disclosed some childhood abuse from her older brother. And she started crying. She said, I haven't thought of this in 60 years. I was 8 years old when this happened, and he was 14 years older than her. And she was probably born in the 20s. Okay. 1920s, not the 1820s.
Okay. Well, it's good that you cleared that up. Yeah.
Yeah. I've for Ian's benefit, not the 2020s either.
Not the 2020s.
But I mean, at that time, sexual things weren't talked about. And so, and then especially, you get a curious 20-year-old, and got a little sister, and, he's getting experimental, and probably I don't think he meant any harm, but I think he created a lot of trouble for her early, and she just, her mother just told her, you got to learn to forget about that. And that was the way they dealt with it. And so this came out, and that brother had, of course, had passed. And so now she had nobody to talk to about that. And so it became a matter of her dealing with a trauma that had been buried for 50 years, 60 years, and getting her through that and understanding that she had done a tremendous job of surviving, that now this was not going to be something that was going to, knock her backwards. This is a strength. She lived with this. Now she can live with the knowledge of it. She lived with, because this was still with her. I think on some level, this was still.
She carried around all those years subconsciously.
And then I think it surfaced. And when it surfaced, it was an issue, but it was something we could deal with, and something she was able to deal with, because she had every problem that she brought out, she had a strength to address. And so therapy with this lady was getting her to see that she had the answer for her problem. And I used the analogy with her. I said, what this is we're cleaning out the hall closet. Yeah. And so we're going to take everything out. We're going to look at it. Do you need it? Have you ever used it? No. Pitch it. You don't need it. You like this? This is a good memory. Let's put that back in here. And so that became the process. To me, that's what therapy is getting people to find they have the strength. They don't recognize it.
Well, and that's great. That's beautiful. And so what's interesting is, like Jordan Peterson talks about, one of his rules for life is, treat yourself like somebody that you care about, or like somebody that you're in charge of taking care of. And he uses like medication compliance as one of his examples, right? Like, half the people who get a prescription actually take the prescription, right? Like, or fill the prescription. I don't have the numbers, but then a smaller percentage actually take it the way it's prescribed. A smaller percentage actually follow through on refills. But if you apply that to a pet, like a dog or a cat, the compliance numbers jump up to like 90%, right? And so his overall thought is, wouldn't it be great if we treated ourselves as well as we treat our dogs, right? And so I think about with this lady, I mean, if you'd asked her about the great qualities of her husband, right off the bat, she'd have had 100 of them, right? Or her dad, same thing. And you say, well, what's great about you? And it's this, well, yeah, so to being able to like treat yourself like you would, and give yourself credit like you would somebody else.
I love that. That's fabulous. I mean, I can even think an experience like my mother. When my father passed, my mother was kind of left in that same situation as this lady. And, my dad was a diabetic and had a couple of strokes. And so she had moved in and took complete control of his medication, of his food regimen, everything. I mean, she became a full-time nurse for him, which she would have done. But the thing is, when he died, she did not take near as good a care of herself as she did my father.
Right.
Because, she didn't see the need. She didn't have the problems he had, so she didn't need to be taken care of.
And there's service, right? And there's caring for others, but you can also kind of reverse that and reframe that by saying, what would your husband want for you? Would he want you to be cared for? And if you have the ability to do that, would that not be something he wanted for you? I'll go as extreme with some clients and have them write their own obituaries, right? And say, let's write it today. Let's write it as if today's the day. And then I'll always follow it up with have them writing their like ideal. Okay, let's say it's 50 years from now, and you're living the life that you've actually wanted to live. What would it say? And that's their treatment plan. Here's what you're leaving behind today. Here's what you want to leave behind. And look at all the great things, because writing an obituary forces them to identify things they did well or things that they hope they can do well in the future. Boom, there's our goal. There's our hope. There's our treatment plan right there. So you have to be careful with that one a little bit, but when it works, that's a pretty powerful intervention that I've had some success with.
Well, I was thinking, I had a friend of mine who was a therapist, and he was firmly convinced that he'd never done anything to help anybody in his life. He was that negative Nancy kind of, thing. And I remember after he passed, he had a heart attack and died. And I went to the visitation, and there were hundreds of people who came in and just said, what this man did for me was, I can never repay him. and I just wish he was alive to hear that.
I think that's one of the great crimes of humanity is that we don't get to have our funerals until it's too late. I mean, you can never know. But imagine how amazing it would be if every single person got to have their funeral a week before they actually passed, and just be able to take that with them. So, Keith, we've got a little bit of time left. One thing I did want to shift to a little bit. When you talk about experience, you have the therapy experience, and you've shared a lot of that in your personal experience, but also just sort of lived experience, right? So there's recent polls that have come out kind of post-pandemic. We shared these on an earlier episode where people are like levels of hopelessness are the highest they've ever been. And, levels of hope and positive outlook on life are the lowest they've ever been. And these are in multiple countries. I think the study we looked at was like in Mexico City and Chicago and London, England. And so this is across the world. It seems to be that we're in a hope recession. Everybody's worried about the recession financially, but we're in a hope recession right now. From your perspective, and just terms of lived experience, one, do you see that? And two, do you see some reasons for that? I mean, what's the way back if that's actually true?
Well, one of the things I know is that the pandemic hit us. We weren't prepared, and we didn't know how to deal with it. And part of the problem was before it became political, it was we have no idea. We don't know what we're dealing with. Are we dealing with some kind of virus that's going to kill us all off, like some kind of science fiction movie or whatever? So everybody was scared. I think that fear got channeled in a lot of different directions, And I know life has changed. I mean, Zoom has changed my ability to do supervision in a positive way. I mean, there are positives that came out of the pandemic. I used to have to get in the car, and that's part of the reason I haven't been to New Hampshire yet is because I have Zoom. But there's a positive. I think we look at the negative. I think what we need to do again is reframe that and see that there were some positives that came out of this 2-year craziness.
Sure. Do you think that social media plays a role in that sense of hopelessness?
I think it's probably the worst thing in the world in a lot of ways. I hate to say that, Ian, because I'm sure he lives with social media, being 20 years old. He's checking his phone right this very second.
He's an old soul. I don't know. Yeah, but no, he's 20, right? So of course. Yeah.
But I just think in a lot of ways, social media, I mean, I've seen it destroy friendships. I've seen it destroy situations. I've seen it propagate lies and just nonsense. And I wish we had some way of, understanding that not everything that happens is progress, and so, I mean, you were talking about the different social media platforms, and I'm sitting there going, I got a Facebook account. I don't know how to use it a whole lot. I'm still having trouble. It's basically wishing happy birthday to people.
Right. Hallmark must hate Facebook. You could just like
oh yeah, I just destroyed cards. But you said all TikTok and all these other things, and I have no clue. I have no clue what these are or how to get on them. Snapchat, you said, I think is what you said, and I'm like, what the heck is that?
Yeah, that's a different deal. Yeah, and there's a line I heard recently. I actually think Dr. Phil said it was like, followers are not friends, right? So like you may have 1 million followers, but it's not a real social interaction, right? And I worry about the echo chamber part of it. I don't have much of a social media presence, but I could get one today, and I could go on there and I could say life sucks. And if I had 1,000 followers, I'd have 100 people agree with me in 13 seconds, right? And they would say, "Yep, my life sucks too, and here's why. And my life sucks too, and here's why. My life sucks too." And I don't have that opportunity for that reframe you talked about. I don't have that opportunity to foster hope, because you almost have to pay somebody like us to go, well, actually, no, it doesn't always suck, right? Like, let's talk about the other side.
And you got to hope people watch, and the thing it is there's, as much as I demean social media, there are some good things that come out of that. And so, like the pandemic and like the recession of hope, that's an interesting line. That's a good line. I like that.
There you go. Write a book about it. There you go. I'll take 10%. If just for the title. You're good. I got you. Yeah.
One of these days. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's
So if it's true, and we do have social media, which we know that's true, and if we are actually in a recession for hope, what would be your sage advice or your advice to the world about how to come back from that? How do we flip that? How do we get to a place where we're building hope, we're not leaking or losing hope?
I think if you're hopeless, you need to only read the things on social media that are positive. I mean, I think you just need to let's stay away from the negative. I mean, when I got on social media, when I first got on Facebook, that's the reason I don't use it anymore. I argued with everybody. And then I realized I was not changing any opinion, mine or anybody else's. And I've seen it destroy friendships, because people don't know how to disagree. It's like when we had the civil discourse, if you and I sat down and we don't agree on something, we can come to agree to disagree because we're face to face. If we're not looking at each other, if we're not actually having a real social interaction, it's hard to do that. So I think you have to face and try to find what's positive and focus on. So now, like I said, if I wish people happy birthday or something positive, or I find a positive little snippet to put on Facebook, it's what I do.
Ian, do you have some thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, he may know more than we do.
Yeah, just two quick thoughts. One is I recommend a book called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. I love this author, love his books. Talks about everything you need to know to have that balance and to cut the negativity of social media and still, benefit from what it has to offer.
Does he have a TikTok? Can I not read the book? I'm kidding. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Any social platform that shows you content that you didn't follow initially, I think that's tricky to navigate. For example, TikTok, if you sign up right now, you don't follow anyone, you open TikTok, they're going to show you the most popular thing without you even asking, and that's going to hook you, and it's going to go to the next one automatically, and then the next one, and then the next one. And it's this never-ending loop. You guys mentioned there's real social interaction, and then there's those followers who are not your friends. I would unfollow anyone that you don't know personally, someone that's a close friend or family member. Just don't do it.
Yeah, but what if they look good in their thumbnail? Right, because that's the hook, right? I'm being funny, but that's what you see. We talk about this with other. I don't want to turn this into a war on social media, but it has woven its way into other conversations, and it's that's that hook of we get to see everybody in the best lighting on their best day, and I compare it to me, in my sweatpants eating ice cream, and I'm like, my life sucks. I'm not on a beach, I'm not constantly on vacation, I don't have perfect lighting, you know what I mean? So I joke about that, but I do think that there's some hijacking of our dopamine and reward systems that lead us down those kind of dark alleys, Well,
I guess the only exception is if there are self-help channels or anything real educational value, then I'd follow that. I follow business coaches, life coaches. I do that, and that's really helpful.
Well, and it's a resource, and I appreciate that perspective, especially from somebody who actually is young enough to be on there. But I think it's a resource like anything else, right? Anything we have at our disposal can be used and can be overused, can be used for good or can be used for bad. So just discernment and responsible use. But it's hard because I have kids as well, and I know that they're not preaching and teaching responsible use. They're teaching mass consumption. Notifications, get on here. Why haven't you checked it in 15 minutes? That kind of stuff. So, Keith, before we part, I do want to kind of one last final thing. So, I appreciate the perspective. I appreciate your stories. Obviously, we're going to have to do this in person when you come out to New Hampshire. We'll get into the studio, and we did that with Dr. Montoya. He did one virtually, and he did it in person, and it was fun. It was good fun. So we'll build on this conversation. But for folks listening, the topic being hope. Any kind of final thoughts? So one thing that you would advise people on that, hey, this will increase your hope, and then one thing that I would avoid because it's gonna negatively affect your sense of hope. What are your two final snippets of advice?
Two final snippets. It's kind of the same thing. I think on social media you avoid the things that are negative. If you look at something and it's negative, if somebody's complaining about something, it's real simple to go to the next post.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
just
don't let
bypass. Yeah, don't let it in. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same thing with real people. I think you need to find yourself away from the people who are negative. And a lot of times those negative people are your family. And, you need to kind of limit your exposure to them. Like you got a crazy uncle, see him at Thanksgiving and then try to avoid him 50 some weeks out of the year, because he's crazy and negative and he's going to bring you down. He's so sad and negative, he's going to make you feel bad. And so you try to avoid that, and you really need to work hard at trying to find some positive support. And I think that's what I tell people in therapy. That's what I tell young clinicians starting out, is you got to find, some belief in yourself. And this is something I do well.
Right. So limit the bad and pursue the good. Seems pretty intuitive.
There was an old song my mother used to sing to me. It's called "Accentuate the Positive." Bing Crosby's song, and you got to eliminate the negative. I mean, that's older than me, which is hard to believe, but it's actually a very valid point.
And we overcomplicate things, right? We sort of go down these, what about this and what about this and what about ism? But it's really, if it's working for you, if it makes you feel better, healthy, not just make you feel good, because now we're into addiction, but if it invests in your health and is an investment in you, do more of it. And if it detracts from you, if it's a deficit, just do less, cut it out, if you can't go cold turkey, just do less, and then less than that, So, all right, Keith, we'll wrap it up there, but I do appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much. Most of you don't know, we film on the weekends. And so Keith is a very busy guy, and to come and make time for us on the weekend. And I appreciate it. I just appreciate your perspective and all you've shared about your long and in some ways still just beginning career. I hope you figure out what you're going to do when you grow up. And I hope that you share that with us when you have that answer. So,
well, if I ever figure it out, you'll be the first to know. You'll be the second to know. I'll be the first to know.
Yeah, shoot over to my TikTok real quick, and I'll look at it there, and you can tell me what it is there. So now, we sound 150 years old talking about this, just so you know.
Yeah, well, sometimes I feel that old. I mean, but I plan on being around for a while. I'm nowhere near done.
And we're glad to have you. We couldn't do without you. So thank you very much, Keith. And in all seriousness, it's funny now that we've talked about, the dangers of social media and how it's tough. I'm going to ask you to come to our social media and look for these episodes and comment and send us emails. And I mean, hell, write us a letter, whatever you want to do if you want to do it old school. But again, I want to reach out and talk about our sponsors real quick. So in New Behavioral Health, Keith Frazier, who you just listened to, is the clinical supervisor. So he doesn't do all the therapy, but he certainly has influence on all of our therapists and is helping guide them to the best possible approaches and the best possible interventions. We're rooted in solution focused. We're rooted in positive psychology. We're committed to fostering hope and building hope with our clients. And I'm certain you would feel that influence with anybody who works at a New Behavioral Health. It's just something that we really believe in. And again, the podcast through Help and Back. If you've enjoyed this time and you want some more of that, we have other episodes that are posted. We do post weekly. If you have ideas for episodes, through helpandback@gmail.com, or you have any comments or questions about this episode, we'll field those questions for you there. So as we always say, Ian, you've got a parting thought?
Oh, yes. Just a friendly correction.
He caught me. Did I mess something up?
Yeah. So the email is helpandback with and fully spelled out. So it's A&D, helpandback@gmail.com.
So forget everything I just said. And don't go to throughhelpandback.com or Gmail. You want to go to helpandback@gmail, and we'll get your ideas there. And I know that we have gotten responses there, so I must not have screwed it up at other podcasts and it must be on our social because people have gotten there. So Help and Back, thank you for that correction, Ian. We do want your ideas. We do want your feedback. And again, a final thank you to Keith. Thank you for coming by, sir. Appreciate it. And so until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thanks so much.